on 558 AM, online, on your smart speaker, and on digital radio. This is Love Sport.
It is Love Sport Radio on a Saturday night. And for the next few hours, it's me. It's Phil Dobbie on a Saturday night through till 1 o'clock in the morning. Hopefully you can stick around. Today, in a survey of 200,000 local newspaper readers in the UK, more than half now want to stay inside the EU. So have we changed our mind? Jon Danzig has some of these figures to hand. He's a former BBC investigative journalist, now devoting a lot of his time to try and keep Britain in the EU. Welcome, Jon. Let's have a look at this research, first of all. It's a credible bit of research. It's got a fairly big sample size, hasn't it?
It is a big sample size, and I think it's not the only poll that gives us an indication that the country is changing its mind. You look at different polls, and they're saying that somewhat more than half, not a large amount more than half, now don't want us to leave the European Union. But conversely, many of those people now think that even though they don't think Brexit was a good idea, we probably have to go ahead with it because it was a democratic decision. I don't happen to agree with that, but that's what the polling says.
So are people changing their minds, do you think, because of the way negotiations have gone, or just because they've seen more information about it now and they've taken a more rational decision?
I think that it's quite obvious that the negotiations are going very badly, and it was a very simplistic binary question in the referendum, and those are often very dangerous ways to make a decision. Even in our own lives, we won't often make a yes or no decision to something, whether we're going to take a job or get married. We'll think about it and we'll consider it, and we can get out of the decision if we think it's a bad one. The idea that we make a decision set in stone 2 years ago and we can't change our mind is somewhat ridiculous. But I would say that the information given to us during the 2016 referendum was inadequate to make a decision, and in many cases it was wrong, the information, and people are waking up to that now. And we don't really know yet what Brexit entails. We're getting a clearer idea, but until we know the full details of the Brexit deal, we won't know, and that's why probably a lot of people are thinking we should have another say, not the same one, but a new vote on actually what are we going to get.
So in this survey that we were talking about, this 200,000 local newspaper readers, of those who voted leave, 75% still believe we're going to be better off outside Europe. Well, you might sort of expect that 100% would believe we'd be better off outside Europe, given that that's what they're voting for. But that means a quarter now think we'd be better off inside, or 18% actually are saying, well, we don't think much is going to change. So, I mean, that tells me that Leave voters are starting to think, yes, well, you know, a quarter of them anyway, are thinking, yes, we need to change our mind on this.
I think so. And if you look at the YouGov polling that has asked the question consistently since the referendum vote, do you think that the Brexit decision was right or wrong? The polling is increasingly going in the direction of it being wrong. And if you analyse that data, it shows that about 2,300 Leave voters are changing their minds every day, as opposed to only about 300 Remain voters. So the country is shifting towards Remain. And even in addition to that, the demographics are going to be Remain, because, although I don't wish any ill harm to anyone, it was mostly the older voters that clinched it for Brexit. Those aged over 50 by majority voted for Brexit, and the older they were, the higher the majority. So the over 75s by a large majority voted for Leave. The under 50s voted by a majority for Remain, and the younger they were, the higher the majority. So those older voters are dying. The younger voters are coming of age who strongly support Remain. So demographically, even if we leave, the chances are we will rejoin at some stage.
Yeah, and I mean, we have a lot more younger voters on the electoral roll because, of course, they have this renewed interest in politics, which is why we saw this swell of support for Jeremy Corbyn. So presumably that would point to a very different result if we had another vote.
The referendum was divisive. It wasn't like the 1975 vote, which was decisively giving a 2-to-1 vote in favour of us remaining in the European community. The referendum split the country in two. I'm not sure yet how we're going to heal from it, but one day, obviously, we'll have to. But it really did split the country. Families are not talking to each other. Friends are broken up. I expect even some relationships have suffered. But we have to remember that 2 out of 4 countries of our union, the United Kingdom, didn't want Brexit. And if you believe the results of this 200,000 survey from local newspapers, Wales has now changed its mind. I think that any government should be circumspect about that. They should be thinking very carefully what is today's will of the people and not keep harping back to what the will of the people was or what they thought it was 2 years ago now.
But it's a challenge to democracy, John. I mean, everyone keeps on saying that, don't they? You know, we've voted, we've decided, anything else is a challenge to democracy. I never quite got that argument, how going to the polls again is a challenge to democracy.
I would say that more votes means more democracy.
Yeah.
When you look at how Parliament makes a decision, it has multiple debates, many votes, over a period of time, often many months, and at any stage during the process, it can change or amend the decision or even abandon the decision. We, the people, only had one vote on one day on a binary, simplistic decision and on information which wasn't adequate, in many cases was misinformation. I say that more votes means that we have a clearer idea what people's will really is. To rely just on one vote in a democracy isn't actually how democracy works. It's about a series of votes. Democracy is a process, not a one-off event.
Yeah, which is why we have elections every few years, of course, rather than sticking with one dictatorship. Before I introduced you, I was talking about the fact that somehow, you know, we're going from 250,000 migrants a year down to a target of 100,000. That sort of indicates, doesn't it, for those people who said, well, we want to take control of our borders, the government believes they can do that without Brexit because they are trying to more than slice in half the number of people coming into this country without leaving the EU.
Well, this is the problem of the misinformation. For one thing, we have never had completely open borders. Everyone has to go through passport control when they come or when they leave. Citizens in the EU cannot just move to another EU country unless they can afford to do so. They can't just arrive and collect benefits. They come for jobs. And actually, the jobs market has been a brilliant controller of EU migration to Britain because those EU migrants come for jobs. If there are no jobs in the main, they don't come or they don't stay. So this idea that Nigel Farage had a few years back when he was so worried that 79 million people would be coming here from Romania and Bulgaria, that was a nonsense scaremongering idea because we'll never have 29 million people coming here for the simple reason that we'll never have 29 million job vacancies. The reason we've had large inflow of migrants in the last few years is because we've had a record number of job vacancies. We've currently got about 800,000 job vacancies in Britain, and we don't have enough Britons to do that.
No, well, we have the latest unemployment figures, 4.2% unemployment. It is the lowest it's been since early 1975, so it doesn't look like too many jobs are being taken by Johnny Foreigner, does it?
Not only that, but we have, according to the records, the highest employment rate on record. So I would say, if you consider that the vast majority of the citizens from the rest of the EU living in Britain are in gainful employment, making a massive net contribution to our treasury and helping our economy, when you consider that they're mostly in employment, then we've probably got the right number. And you have to ask the question, if they were all to leave, and I'm not suggesting they all do, but many already have, but if they were all to leave, who would do the jobs they vacate? Because we simply don't have enough Britons to do all the jobs in Britain.
Sir Amber Rudd, of course, has been pushing the argument quite forcibly that too many EU migrants are taking our jobs. Maybe we're listening to Amber Rudd a little less now because of the whole Windrush debacle, and maybe that is shifting attitudes as well towards migration in this country. What do you reckon?
I think that we're getting very mixed messages from people, and it must be very confusing for them. On the one hand, Amber Rudd said at the first Conservative conference after the referendum that companies should give a list of all the foreign workers that they employ so they could be named and shamed for not giving those jobs to British workers. That was a proposed policy of the Tory party, which they had to drop, not because I guess they didn't agree with the idea, because there was a public outrage. You got Theresa May, who as Home Secretary was saying that migration had almost zero value to the country. Then, in her Christmas message to EU migrants was, we want you to stay, our country will be poorer without you. Well, which is it? It can't be both.
No, absolutely. And then we've got the whole argument about growth, haven't we? How the economy will grow so much more when we take control of our own destiny. Our annual GDP growth rate now is 1.2% compared to 2.1%, which is where it was before the Brexit vote. We were one of the fastest growing European countries. France was 1.2% before the Brexit vote. Now it's 2.1%. We've basically switched places. They've now got growth which is about twice what it is in the UK. A similar story with Germany, where growth is now 2.9%. In short, we were leading and now we're behind. They're going up, we're going down. Related to Brexit, do you think?
Yes. I mean, Brexit hasn't happened yet. I want only the best for Britain. I'm speaking up because I feel I'm a patriot. I'm worried that Brexit will do Britain great damage. It will make us less secure and less prosperous. And let's face it, this is what Theresa May and 70% of her current cabinet told us during the referendum campaign. Well, none of the facts have really changed since then. So were they right then or now? And Amber Rudd, incidentally, said in the 2016 referendum, I passionately believe it is best for us all and our country if we remain a member of the EU. So many mixed messages. It's any wonder that people believe politicians anymore, and probably many don't. But I would say that it doesn't make logical sense to think that we will be freer or richer outside the EU. And that's because in the EU we have free trading with our most important and most valuable customers and suppliers right on our doorstep, which is the world's biggest, richest free marketplace and the world's biggest exporter and importer of manufactured goods and services. And through the EU, in which we participate, it's not them dictating to us, we take part in the democratic decision-making. We have got trade agreements with around 60 countries across the world. Now, those are very good trade agreements because the EU, being such a big organisation, can negotiate good trade agreements. But when we've left, those trade agreements will have to be torn up.
And we have to start again.
Have to start again.
Yeah.
And I don't think that there's any hope that we will get trade agreements anywhere near as we've got now, let alone better. And in any event, it will take years to find out.
We're a smaller player. We've got less negotiating power. Just very briefly, John, because we do have to go, but just very quickly, do you think the Irish border question is going to be the question that brings Brexit down? Because there's clearly no straight answer, is there, to this? If it doesn't finish Brexit off, it could split the government. I mean, if we look at today's newspaper saying that David Davis might resign over the idea that we stay in some sort of trade zone, it's splitting the government and it's splitting the country, but maybe it's the divisive answer which could resolve the whole thing once and for all.
I would say that the border problem on the island of Ireland is the Achilles heel of Brexit because the government has not been able to come up with a solution. They keep fudging everything. It's not just the border on Ireland, but all the things they say. They either have to back down or they put it to one side and say, we'll deal with it later. Well, later's coming rapidly, and I think it will be seen that it will come undone. They just can't deliver what they're promising.
That and on many other things as well. John, appreciate your time. Let's talk again in coming weeks, because obviously the closer we get to that deadline, whatever that deadline is, we've been past so many of them, then more things just come to a head, don't they? So let's catch up again very soon. Appreciate your time. That is Jon Danzig talking to us. He is an investigative journalist and a great website as well. Google his name, Jon Danzig. You can find lots more research and facts and figures about Brexit. It's Love Sport Radio. It's 26 after 10.
This is Love Sport.